guess. Yeah, there's Dial, Elton.
Yeah, how do I pause this?
What?
How do I pause this if I need to?
Push stop. Push that same button you started with.
Okay.
How are you?
They did. Okay. I kind of got ahead of myself there for a minute. This is in memory of Jimmy. James Lawrence Rawls was born July the 13th, 1923, at Orange, Texas, to Alice Winifred Bollinger Rawls and Dempsey Bennett Rawls. He was the seventh of 8 children born to this family and the second son. The first son died when he was only a few months old. Jimmy would have loved growing up in the area where he was born, where the woods were deep and dark, and where strands of gray Spanish moss hung from the tree branches, where there were many kinds of animals to hunt and many kinds of fish in the slow-moving Sabine River. But World War I had ended, and there was no longer work for Jimmy's father at the large shipyard where ships had been built to engage in the war against Germany's leader, Kaiser Bill. Before long, the children of America would forget the words they had chanted during the war. Even the little girls chanted this rhyme, "In time to jumping rope." Kaiser Bill went up the hill to take a look at France. Kaiser Bill came down the hill with bullets in his pants. So Jimmy's family moved back to Temple, Texas, where they had lived before the war. Early on, Jimmy was a sickly child, and his mother was in constant fear that she would lose another son. At Temple, Jimmy's father was unable to find steady work. The Great Depression was already starting to rear its ugly head in the South. After a period of frustration and a few jobs that lasted only days, the word spread that cotton farmers in East Texas were in need of pickers. Through a government plan, anyone interested in transportation to East Texas could enter into a contract whereby a trucker would haul them out. The cotton farmer would pay the trucker for their transportation, and the cotton picker would become a virtual slave of the farmer until he had picked enough cotton to pay off his debt. Only the bare necessities could be taken: clothing, some bedding, and a few kettles, but no furniture. Luckily, Jimmy's family ended up working for a kind couple with several young children. One of their sons was named Alton, and years later, Jimmy's sister Viola named her second son after this young man. Jimmy's family lived in a one-room cabin set deep in attractive East Texas woodland. Jimmy was too young to work in the fields, so he stayed at the cabin with his mother until noon each day. Just down the hill from the cabin was a clear, bubbling spring, which supplied the family with water. In a small, deep depression above the spring lived a tangled mass of Granddaddy Longlegs. Jimmy loved to toss rocks among these spider-like creatures and watch them scatter. His mother cooked the family's meals in a cast-iron kettle that hung from a tripod above a campfire. It was a rude awakening from the life she had previously lived. Most afternoons, Jimmy's mother would go to the fields and pick cotton, while Jimmy sat and played on a quilt under the trees at the end of the field. In the spring of 1926, the family moved to a different community, and Jimmy's father started sharecropping. He had never been a farmer, but he found that he had a natural gift for agriculture, and the rest of his life, Jimmy Rawls enjoyed planting and cultivating and watching vegetables and flowers grow. Also that spring, a new member was added to the Rawls family, a little girl who was named Marie Louise. It was a great tragedy to the family when 3 years later this child also was taken from them. While living at Orange, the Rawls family had met the first LDS people they had known, a widow lady and her grown daughter. Jimmy's mother had gone to hear the Mormon elders speak at this lady's home, and in all their following moves, the LDS missionaries had kept in touch with the Rawls family. The family members who were old enough were baptized into the church in 1926. A few weeks later, shortly after they had managed to pay to have their furniture shipped out from Temple, and while Jimmy's father and the older children were working in the field, the house they were living in burned to the ground, destroying all but a few items that Jimmy's mother was able to save. She had discovered that the house was on fire while she and Jimmy were at the table eating dinner. She quickly dragged a mattress from one of the beds and, putting it a distance from the house, she put Jimmy and Marie on it and told Jimmy to stay with the baby while she went back to get more things from the house. When she got back, the baby was there, but Jimmy was gone. She ran back into the house and found Jimmy sitting at the table, calmly finishing his meal. There was very little money to spend, so it was seldom that Jimmy had a chance to go to a grocery store. But when he did go and saw all that candy on display, he decided he wanted to be a grocery man. So every tin can he could lay his hands on was added to his store, and woe be to anyone who happened to knock over his prize stack of cans. As Jimmy grew older, he started to develop a liking for hunting and fishing, but his father was not interested in either sport. Luckily, there was a young man, a family friend, who was interested in both, and also in one of the Rawls daughters, and on occasion he would take Jimmy hunting or fishing with him. At age 8, the year before the family moved to Idaho, Jimmy also became interested in this man's young sister. When Marie died at age 3, Marion Cheney was one of the missionaries who came to speak at her funeral. Later, after Marion had returned from his mission, he started writing to Jimmy's oldest sister, Alice, and in 1932 they met in Utah, where they were married in the Salt Lake Temple. Oil had been discovered in East Texas by then, and the landowners were no longer interested in raising cotton and corn, so eventually the rest of the Rawls family moved to Idaho. Jimmy had a dog, Prince, who to Jimmy was not a dog but a member of the family. When the suggestion was made that the dog be given to a neighbor, Jimmy put his foot down. If the dog didn't go, then he didn't go. So Prince came with the family to Idaho. The trip was long with many flat tires and other problems, but eventually the family reached their destination. Jimmy quickly made new friends. He enjoyed going to Sunday school in the basement of the Sunnydale schoolhouse. Imagine Sunday school being held in the schoolhouse these days. And one of the amusing memories of his first days of attendance at Sunday school was when he was given the privilege of quoting what was called the memory gem. It was supposed to be sure your sins will find you out. And Jimmy proudly got up and in a clear voice declared, be sure you sin and they'll find you out. Jimmy was only about 11 or 12 when he started selling the Grit newspaper each Saturday. The family was living in the upper part of Sunnydale then, and he walked all through most of Sunnydale and Archer to deliver papers. The satchel of papers was pretty heavy when he first started out, and the trip in the winter was especially hard. It was a relief those cold days when he reached the home of his sister and sat on her oven door drinking hot chocolate and eating toast while he warmed up. If it was at all possible, his brother-in-law, Eugene Erickson, would drive him home in the car after his route had been covered. When he arrived home, his father counted every paper that was left and the money for those that Jimmy had sold, and if things didn't balance out correctly, Jimmy found himself in big trouble. Eventually, he managed to get a bicycle to use in the summer months. When he reached the appropriate age, Jimmy joined the CCC camp, and shortly after his release, he joined the Navy, where he served for the duration of World War II. After the 5 Sullivan brothers, who were all serving on one ship, were killed, and the regulation was passed exempting only sons from having to serve in combat, Jimmy's parents were contacted by the Navy and told that if they chose, they could have Jimmy sent home immediately. They responded that they would leave it up to Jimmy. When his ship's captain called him in and made the same offer to Jimmy, he told him that if he quit now, he could never look his shipmates in the eye again, so he chose to stay on to the finish. Jimmy was very proud of his service to his country. On May the 8th, 1946, Jimmy married Vonda Pelton, a beautiful young lady who was a good companion to him. They had a lot in common, and he finally had the fishing and hunting buddy that he had always wanted. Jimmy had been friends with Vonda's older brother, Gerald, since Vonda was about 11 years of age. She had enjoyed teasing them and mussing their hair when they were all dressed up ready to go on a date. And when Jimmy came home from the war, he found Vonda all grown up and ready to date him. She was only 16 when they were married. Vonda was a good cook and housekeeper and made especially delicious bread. Jimmy had worked in radar while in the Navy, and with the government aid offered for ex-servicemen, could have made a career in television or other related fields, but he seemed to prefer a more simple life and always worked as a farm laborer or mechanic, choosing to have time for the mountains and streams that both he and Vonda loved. On May the 12th, 1987, Vonda departed this life, and she has probably picked out a special fishing hole where she waits for Jimmy to join her. They raised 4 daughters. His surviving family consists of Beulah and David Hayes, Shirley and Larry Kennedy, Lorraine and Don Roberts, and Kitty and Ray Barnes. Also 16 grandchildren and 16 great-grandchildren. I feel it would be appropriate to end this life sketch with a poem that I wrote for Vonda's life sketch. Give me a valley with sun-dappled streams, a hill that is covered with trees. Give me the time to relax and to dream, and that will be heaven for me. Give me a garden to plant and to hoe, a song I can hum at my task, a cool spot to rest at the end of the row, and that's all of heaven I'll ask. Give me the freedom to toss in my line and reel in a beautiful trout, the brisk morning air and the scent of the pines. Oh, that is what heaven's about. Give me a world much as God gave us here. Just leave out the heartaches and pain. But give me my friends and my family so dear, and that will be heaven again. My new day is dawning. I wouldn't ask much. This world, as God meant it to be, all sparkling and new by his wonderful touch. Oh, that would be heaven for me.
Yeah, 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 I raised out there down close to Rexburg, Burton. Well, oh, yeah, that was a good service.
It was. All righty. You take care now. All right.
You folks had a chance to sign the book?
You got close in.
Yeah, I took the first one that's coming.
I know. All right.
I'm stepping behind. I'm just going into the shade here.
If it was already gone, I can do it.
I will.
To see Dallas.
See ya. You sure did a good job.
Yeah, just to get to know.
David, how you doing? You guys on my scene, you guys recognize John Cash, David Beal, going up there. Well, you better got that. Oh, you better. At least that way it gets me away from the damn table and have to list all that. I'll do it. I really fix it. Everybody has that. Well, there's just another one. I'm number one again.